Hello everyone, my name's Cliff and welcome back to my channel. This is Cliff's Dark Gems. Today I'm going to be weighing in on the DNF debate. For those of you that are not in the know, DNF means did not finish. So we're talking about books that you throw aside because they are so awful that you cannot read another word. And I'm going to be giving my own personal opinions on this. Stay tuned. First of all, I'd like to be looking at this from my own point of view, from my own reading history. I'm looking at some of the books that I've DNF'd in the past and thinking why I threw them aside at the time. Now, these are not your normal things that you might hear on BookTube, but this is a personal thing for me. First of all, most of the books I've DNF'd were when I was in my teens, 20s, maybe early 30s. I'm 52 now and I tend to not DNF books that much anymore as I find a reason to read them. One of the reasons that I think a lot of books were DNF'd in the past is simply about age and maturity. Sometimes the book is just beyond your age. Maybe your knowledge of the language or of the ideas, philosophy, science. And one of those books that comes to mind is Neil Stephenson, Quicksilver. Now, I tried to read this book when I was at university. I did major in English and psychology, but I just found this book very dense with ideas and philosophies and science. And I just don't think my mind at that stage was ready for this content. Maybe it's not still. Perhaps I won't enjoy it, but later on I might give it another try. So in this case it's not so much DNF, it might be more shelving it for later. And I think that's a very important distinction that we make, especially if you look at books you've DNF'd when you're a lot younger, because your reading tastes change. Another book that I DNF'd is Dan Simmons' Hyperion. I don't have a copy anymore, but one of the reasons I DNF'd it was because I wasn't really that interested in science fiction. I loved Dan Simmons as a writer, I love him as a horror writer, but the idea of tackling one of his science fiction novels, and I can think of a lot of other examples of fantastic science fiction novels that I might appreciate more now as a 52-year-old than when I tried when I was 20 or 30. At that stage I was more into high fantasy. So your taste might change. Therefore, this is more a question of shelving a book as opposed to throwing it aside. Okay, next we have one of the more frequent reasons why I've tossed books aside and never read them again. And that's very simply because time, life and responsibilities get in the way. You don't have the time to read a book or a series. Now, one very big example of this is George R.R. Martin, The Game of Thrones. I absolutely love the miniseries and I would love to pick this up again. I think I also tried to read this at university and you just don't get the time. You have to study. Later on I was a full-time teacher. You have to work. So where are you going to find the time? Also the Wheel of Time. I would love to get to that again as well. But at the moment it is shelved, not DNF'd. Okay, lastly, here are two books that I seriously did DNF and I might struggle to pick them up again. First is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I've got about halfway, as you can see the bookmark is still in there, and I seriously doubt if I'm going to pick it up again. The first third of the book was actually very entertaining, and then it just took a turn for the worse. I did not care for it, and yeah, that might be one book that I don't pick up again. Secondly, we get Stephen King, Under the Dome. Now, at the moment I'm reading Doomy Key again and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But this book just was too much for me. I read about 100 pages. I looked at the size of it. I would like to read it again sometime, but more as a point of actually finishing my entire Stephen King reading experience. So as a completionist thing, but at the moment I don't know if I'm really interested in finishing it. Okay everyone, generally speaking now, I can think of 2 reasons why you should absolutely DNF a book. Let's say, for instance, that the book is over 800 pages, even 400 pages, and you are about 150 pages in, and you cannot stand this book. It is making you miserable. There is not one aspect of the book that you are enjoying, neither the characters, the settings, and all it's going to do is make you more miserable. Life is too short. Put it aside and find another book more to your taste. Because reading a book like that can actually put you into a real reading slump. It can be very difficult to get out of. It can affect you, it can make you anxious, it can make you depressed, and it can affect your life outside of reading. So I seriously think that is something to take into consideration when you pick up a massive book in particular. Maybe not so much for a novella. Even if you're struggling and it is maybe 150, 200 pages long, maybe it's best to push through. Second reason is if the book you're reading is outside of your boundaries of good taste. If the book is graphically violent, overly sexual, contains cruelty to animals, or contains something other that also pushes your buttons, then it is best to put it down. And I think that is why it is so important, and I do it in my reviews where I talk about this book has this. So if you cannot handle this, do not read it. So I think those are 2 reasons why you should DNF a book if it's making you uncomfortable. However, there are also 2 reasons more why you should maybe just shelve it. As I said earlier, if life gets in the way, something happens outside of your reading that requires your time, then put it aside, and if you feel the need, pick it up again, especially if you were enjoying it, like I am DNFing now. I wasn't in the right headspace when I read it then, and I picked it up now again and I'm really enjoying it. Another thing is you might not be in the mood. So a lot of people are mood readers, and you might find you are feeling angry or just something is getting you down, and you try to read a book and you can't focus because you're not in the mood for this book at this time in your life, but you might be at a later stage. So don't give up on the book, put it back on the shelf and give it another try. Okay, now I'm just going to think of myself at the age of 52 and why for the most part I don't think I'm going to be DNFing books. I might be wrong, but as a booktuber that wants to review and discuss books with you, the viewer, I think it's almost a responsibility to try and finish those books so that you can give an honest opinion on the book. Whether it's a 1-star, 2-star or 5-star, I think it's a responsibility to actually push through. And also, you might find something valuable in a book. At 52, I think I know my favorite genre now, and I know my favorite authors, and I know the kind of things that I want to talk about. So it should be easier to choose books that you're more unlikely to just throw aside. And that is what I try to do. Okay everyone, and now in conclusion, I do think that there's a fair argument for DNFing books. However, I don't think you should be DNFing every 2nd or 3rd or 4th book that you read. I think for the most part you might find something valuable, and it might be a better idea to push through and try and finish the book. After all, you've paid for it. It's in your library. And I don't know, personally I feel if I start a book and I toss it aside, for me that's kind of a waste. Not that I'm a huge book collector, but I like the idea of finishing what I've paid for, and the satisfaction that it gives me to read a book, put it down, and I finished it and I can talk about it. Second of all, and this is a personal gripe of mine, especially on BookTube, but if you do this, please, it's just my opinion, but I do not believe that you can give a rating on BookTube, or on Goodreads rather, and say it's a 1 star because I got 50 pages into the book and I hated it and I threw it out the window. I don't believe that you can do that. I think you need a view of the complete book, the beginning, the middle and the end, so that you can give a proper explanation as to why you did not like the book. But that is just my opinion. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments below. Be polite, please. And I really hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for tuning in. Keep those pages turning. Cheers.